Okay, so thank you everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our UXPA webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by Swapnali Thakar. The topic is effective personas to inform strategy with the jobs to be done framework. So we're really excited to have Swapnali join us today for this particular webinar. I'm sure it will be informative and we'll all learn something really great and new. Upcoming webinar, July 31st, we have an inclusive design webinar beyond accessibility with Communicate Health. So that will be an interesting one. And then we have an upcoming short course in August for effective personas for jobs to be done framework, again, with Swapnali as our course instructor. So if you find today what she presents to be really helpful and really insightful, and you want to get a deeper dive into this particular topic, definitely be sure to register for her short course coming in August, okay? A few housekeeping items before we begin. Everybody is on mute. For obvious reasons. If you have any questions for her, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. Okay, we definitely want to drop questions in the Q&A box. That is the area that Swapnali will actually be manning to make sure all of your questions get answered. So again, any questions, drop them in the Q&A box. And as far as the recording will be made to you, available to you guys at least 72 hours at the conclusion of this particular webinar. With that said, I am going to pass it off to Swapnali.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Carm. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's get started. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining today. I hope everyone's staying safe in this crazy time of time of life, I should say, not a year, because we've never seen this happen before, but everyone's remote now. So welcome and thank you for taking the time. I know it's hard for me. I have to manage my 6-year-old son, make sure he's busy while I do that. So thank you for taking the time. For some of you, it is lunchtime. So yeah, we are going to talk about effective personas to inform strategy with a framework called Jobs to be Done. And I'll share some details about how to do that, but it is quite an in-depth topic, and that is why there is a short course also if you want to do a deep dive into it. But I think this will give you a good flavor of what it is all about, and hopefully give you some tips to progress in your practice of UX research or presenting personas. So a little about me. For some reason my keyboard's not working. Okay. I'm a design thinker. I like to think of myself as also a systems thinker. I like to read about systems thinking as well. I am the director of UX and product strategy at Verde currently. And I help our clients at Verde build a human-centric vision for products, for digital products, and I coordinate between business design and technology to help improve digital products and create a roadmap that calls for continuous improvement, because as we all know, technology changes and we need to adapt and evolve with technology as we move forward. I'm also a mother of 6-year-old son, like I mentioned before. He's obsessed with animals. He reads everything about animals. He watches TV about animals. So we make YouTube videos about animals. So check it out on YouTube if you have any kids. So that's a little about me. I'm happy to connect with all of you on LinkedIn as well to get to know you guys a little bit more as well. So let's move to the agenda. So we'll look at today, what is the problem with personas? We'll look at the goals. We'll look at what is exactly jobs to be done. Where does it come from? I'm not going to do a deep dive into the history of it too much. I'll just, there's a lot of material out there if you want to go deeper, but I'll brush through it a little bit. And I usually like to share examples from real life. So what I actually have faced and how I practice and how I use it myself. So there will be less theory and more practical examples, and hopefully that will help. And we'll end with some tips to move forward, and we'll have some Q&A time in the end as well. So why did I choose this topic? Why personas? There has been a lot of critique recently about personas, and a lot of times the critique goes like, you know, the person has 3 kids. Wow, good for them. But I'm building a B2B platform. How does that matter? So I see a lot of that. I interview candidates for projects, and I ask them to present some of their research and persona work, and I see this all the time. A lot of information is plugged into those personas. Some of it is relevant, some of it is not. So how do we make it all useful? Stakeholders don't care about it. They're like, nah, so what? We already knew that. If it is an existing product, a lot of times in an established organization, a lot of people already are aware of some of the problems faced. They talk to the customers all the time. So they don't really care about this artifact that we create as part of our research. So what do we do? How do we make them see the importance of it? So what do? We say this, evangelize them, whatever that means, right? How do I do that? Evangelize. I present it to them. I talk about the personas a lot. I make sure that everyone's aware that they exist. And sure enough, 6 months, 8 months down the line, nobody remembers what those are and what was the point of that. So then what do you do? Then how else do you personify this persona? So we come up with another idea that is this. Let's put a cubicle in with an actual person there, and then hopefully that will help people relate to the persona much better, right? So why are we doing all this though? What is the problem? Why are not people engaged with the artifacts that we are creating? And the problem is actually because they're half-baked and pointless. And I apologize if I'm blunt here, but I've seen a lot of pointless facts embedded in the persona that don't matter. And they're half-baked. They're not based on real research. So this was my attempt at some humor about personas. But why should we care, right? Why do we care so much that people should take the personas seriously? What are they for anyway? And what do we say? Empathy, duh, it's for empathy. How do you not know that? But when I started looking at this research and the artifacts and reading books about UX research and how does this help, I got stuck at empathy and how do we measure it? How do you know that your artifact is actually usable? So we as UX researchers and designers and product designers, we have to know the usability of our artifacts. Are the artifacts we are creating actually useful? Our own artifacts, are they actually useful? So let's then, we talk about measuring or KPIs for projects all the time. Like, how are you going to measure success? But how are we measuring the success of a persona? If nobody's adopting it, if nobody's using it, then what's the point? And that is why I chose this particular topic, because I think you can make a difference with a persona. You can actually impact strategy in a persona. But it's more than that. It's more than empathy. It's a lot more, and a lot more. So I like to start where it all started, right? Who brought this idea to the table? As some of you may or may not know, Alan Cooper is regarded as a pioneer of personas, and he created goal-directed design methodology as practical tools for designing interactions between people, bringing the human in the design. And that was great, but somehow down the line, we lost the goal-directedness of it, I feel, from what I've seen in the field today. So because we are UX practitioners, we pride ourselves of bringing the voice of the human to the table. Now, as more and more ethical questions come about in our discussions around UX or technology, we have become the voice of ethics because we are the voice of humans. And personas is all of that, right? It brings the voice of human. It creates awareness of ethics around any issues or problems or pain points that the human is facing. But at the same time, I think we are fundamentally here, a lot of us, to make an impact on the business goals and the user goals. And that is the key that we tend to forget, I think, when we create artifacts and how to make artifacts usable. So what is the goal of the personas? From what I have seen, this is what I think they're supposed to do. So we are here to create personas to create responsible, human-centric business strategy. So we are here to promote responsibility as digital product designers. We are here to create human centricity within our products, as well as we are here to identify business strategy and how to compete. So the business goal of the persona, from my point of view, is to compete effectively, to inform roadmap, and also inspire to innovate. It would be the business goal. And if we drill down further down the funnel, I think as creators, a persona helps us build a shared understanding of the problem space. Who are we creating and what are we creating what are we creating, who are we creating it for, and so on and so forth, and why are we doing this? So it brings all of the stakeholders, product, business design, engineering, and whoever else you have on the same page to have a shared understanding. Having said that, we know that personas are not the end all and be all of it. There are various tools out there that can help you do the same thing. But I believe that personas can be used not only just to create empathy, but also drive business strategy. So what is this framework? What is jobs to be done? Where does it come from? So like I said before, I'm not gonna dive too deep into the details of the history of it. But there are two books that I would like to mention here. The first book was this one, Value Proposition Design. This is where I came across the terms jobs. And recently, Kim Kalbach has published an excellent book on jobs to be done, where he has summarized all of the different plays, which also includes value prop design, by the way, as one of the plays that you can use to drive strategy. So I think both of these are important references. You should buy them if you get a chance, or read them if you get a chance. So Jim Kalbach describes jobs in his playbook as a job to be done is an objective that someone is trying to achieve in a given context. So for example, I was recently doing a study on physiotherapy, patients of physiotherapy. So what is the job to be done in that case, especially in healthcare? Of course, we need empathy with that person, but what is the person trying to get done? So at the fundamental core of it is that the person is trying to get better and trying to overcome whatever shock of maybe it's a motor vehicle accident, or maybe it is a fall. So they're trying to overcome that. And what are the different things they're doing in order to get to that objective of getting better. So that is what a job to be done to me is. So having started off with an example, let's dive a little bit deeper into some more examples. So sorry, there's a question here. That's the key. Personas represent synthesis, not what we think about who our personas are. So thank you, Abraham, for that comment. Moving on, so let's look at an example here. So to give you a brief context and background of this persona, this persona was created for a marketing tool. It helps marketers do their jobs better, in short. And it is a SaaS product, mostly sold to wealth management firms. So that's a brief context that I would like to give without going too deep into what it is. And I took a snapshot of an existing persona that I came across when I asked for existing research. And this is what I had found from there. Not too bad. It was 3 pages long. I just posted one of the pages here. It was not a bad persona description. It gave me a fair bit of an idea of what marketing manager Mary does. But aside from the fact that why challenges are the goals, we'll get into that later, maybe during the course. But aside from that fact, there are like nuggets of information here that are packed with potential and possibility. And let's look at that. So let's just take this first sentence here. Mary spends her day addressing, etc. And let's look at how we can unpack some of the stuff that's there that could potentially inform the roadmap or the strategy. So this is the sentence that we are going to unpack. So this is the sentence. Mary spends her day addressing the needs and concerns of her team, reporting and analyzing KPI data, developing high-level strategic objectives, and maintaining the marketing budget. Now, these are all the things that Mary does, and I totally agree with them, and it's great. But we can unpack this even further to inform what, as an engineer, what am I supposed to do? As a product manager, what am I supposed to make? As a designer, how am I supposed to make it? So how do we do that? So let's see how we can make this better, and you can even make it better even further. So this is just the first step of getting into this stuff, right? So marketing manager Mary does reporting and analyzing of KPI data. This is huge, right? It's packed with material. So how do you unpack it? So let's say she's a marketing persona. So let's extrapolate from that. So she probably conducts market research, right? And this is not purely based on extrapolation. It was based on interviews and all of that. And I'll get to that point later. But let's say hypothetically you did not interview anybody and you were supposed to extrapolate from the existing persona. What do they do? So as a marketing person, she probably does a lot of marketing research to find answers about consumer requirements, habits, trends. Aside from that, she analyzes marketing data, like what are her campaigns and her attempts, what kind of results are they creating, so that she can then formulate future marketing strategies based on that data. And then she analyzes engagement data such as likes, shares, comments, listens for podcasts and views for videos, etc. And there is a lot more to this. I'm just taking a very narrow piece of information here just so that the example is simple enough for this discussion. So anybody want to venture in terms of what kind of product features or roadmap items you might think that might come off of this? So you can type in the Q&A if you want. I'll wait for half a minute for your answers. A dashboard, perfect. What would the dashboard contain? All right, that's some food for thought for you to think about. There's a ton of material here. So the dashboard might represent market research. How do I present market research to this person? What kind of requirements or habits and trends am I seeing in the market? So it was for a wealth management firm. So what kind of content? Yeah, that's good. Summary of most liked content. Analytics for the last one, perfect. Like there's so many things we can extrapolate, and you can even break this down further into smaller jobs to address some of those minute and intricate details of each of these jobs. So let's look at another example. So to give you a brief context for this particular persona, this was created for a planogram tool. So if some of us don't know what a planogram is, basically in the retail world, if you are a store owner, you put your product in shelves, right, for display. But there are particular brands, let's say Coca-Cola or Lay's chips, they want their product to be displayed a particular way that they want. So they want the store managers to lay out the shelf in exactly as prescribed to them. And that is called a planogram. So they basically, a lot of times you will see pictures or binders full of pictures that tell store managers how to lay out that shelf. That's what a planogram tool is. So this was persona meant for a planogram tool, and it was custom built product for an enterprise. So there was nothing before we started this project. So I've taken a persona that I've found that was similar from the internet for a store manager, for example. And I ventured to do that because even though it was not for a planogram tool, it is a great example of how much detail you can put into a persona for a store manager. So this is something I found off of the internet. He's a store manager for a medium-sized store. And a lot of great stuff here, key characteristics, goals, what are the influencers, what are the pain points and frustrations, personality traits. He's energetic, he's busy, he's fearless, but him being energetic, busy, and fearless doesn't give me anything as an engineer to make, or a designer on how to make something that's busy and fearless. I don't know. So how do you make this more meaningful? How do you make each line of your persona more and more meaningful to the stakeholders so that they take our artifacts seriously? So let's look at a nugget again from here. Let's look at managing store efficiently is one of his jobs, let's say, right? So let's take manage store efficiently. What does that mean? What are the things I do to manage my store efficiently? Now let's focus on the product at hand. We know the context of this persona is a planogram, right? So if the context is planogram and the fact that I as a designer know that this person does inventory management as is one of his jobs is so valuable, and I'll show you how. So what does managing store efficiently, one of the jobs, if we break it down into inventory management, one of the jobs is to arrange product according to planograms. Perfect, my tool does that. What else can my tool do? He also needs to order the items that need to be reordered. He also needs to record what needs to be restocked, so something that's already in the back end. He also needs to track what is sold. So let's take an innovation example here. If we are to innovate from this set of jobs, what do you think might be some of the innovative solutions from here? Anybody venture on the Q&A? Come on, people, I need to see some engagement to make this a engaging session. So what kind of stuff can you extrapolate from here that a store owner or store manager can do in terms of, aside from just arranging shelves according to planograms? So let's go on a wild ride here, right? Let's say you could do anything. You could do anything. You're not bound by perfect. So thank you Gayatri for that. So Gayatri says not a planogram for just arranging, but one that would help to do rest of the jobs, such as restocking. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of answers here actually. I needed to scroll down. Sorry, guys. But one that would help to do rest of the jobs too, such as restocking, reordering, etc. Another dashboard by shelf. Yeah, that could be it. What quantities there and they're missing. Plan and product placement to increase sales. Some kind of inventory tracking system. Perfect. Automate ordering of items. Fantastic, Dwani. Melanie, ability to order and actions. Tracking tools, supply list, filtering features. Amazing. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Yeah, now you can see the potential of not only the importance of knowing the job related to your tool, but also the importance of knowing jobs that that person does as a whole, because it opens up a slew of opportunity of innovation, expansion. What else can this product do? How can we build it even further? How can we make this person's job easier over time? This supplies you with endless possibilities. One of the products that we built for a retailer, not this one particularly, but it was a retail portal, and we had mapped out 3 years worth of work for that, just to make that person's job easier. That's the power of jobs to be done. And that is what I hope that I brought it to the table through these examples for you to realize that how powerful it can be. So then where do you start, right? Where do you start with describing these jobs? We cannot oversee the process of research, right? You have to have some in-depth interviews, start with 1, 2, 3, whatever you can get your hands on. And I will share in the short course with you how to actually conduct those interviews to get deeper into the jobs. Focus on what the person is trying to get done. So think about it this way. Think about the core of the job, right? It could be an online store or a physical store. Regardless of where that store is, the objective of that person is to sell product, right? If the objective of that person is to sell product, that's the core. That rarely changes. That has been that way since we've known commerce as humans. We need to sell product. Now, once you have that down, you can then break it apart into smaller jobs. You need to find suppliers. You need to order the product. You need to display the product. Whether it's online or physical, you still need to display it somehow. You need to price it. You need to make sure you're making profit. You need to, do all kinds of accounting to make sure everything's working in your favor, so on and so forth. That has not changed. So if you think about it, that basic core of selling something has not changed over time. Also, the third tip is to keep your solution out of it. So forget about your product, your tool. When you do the research, when you do the interviews, just ask about what the person is trying to get done. So having a store or shop, a retail shop, or a marketing persona are fairly common. But I found myself creating or designing a tool for industrial hygienists at one point. For example, I needed to know, without looking at what we could or could not do, like getting into the requirements and constraints, putting all of that aside, what is the person trying to get done? And I realized that the industrial hygienist actually wears a lot of PPE, personal protective equipment, on themselves, and goes into manufacturing facilities, into places that could have harmful chemicals and stuff like that. And then they take samples to make sure that the facilities are safe for the workers. And when I was doing that, I realized that it is so important for us to not worry about what our solution is, but to worry about, and this is where empathy and human-centeredness comes in, is how is this person going to use my phone and my app if that person is wearing all this stuff and carrying the testing equipment with both their hands. So we need to understand that context a lot. So field studies are important for that kind of research as well. So those are the tips for where to start. What do you do next? Then bring it all back home. Analyze it, right? Analyze what are they trying to do. Try to get to the core as deep as possible, and then start defining the jobs. I usually like to use 2 or 3 words to define a job, like analyze data. Start there. And then if you're marketing, what kind of data are you going to analyze? Break it down further, and then break that down further, so on and so forth. Make sure that all of your jobs that you have described are actionable, that they actually take action. For example, in the marketing persona that I shared with you earlier, one of the items there was keep customers happy, or keep advisors happy. What does that mean? Is that actionable? What am I doing to keep them happy? It does not give me substantial information to make that job actionable. How do I make it measurable? How do I make that job measurable? So analyzing data. So in terms of, let's take the marketing persona example again. In terms of making our job measurable, so our job as UX researchers measurable. So the job you've described as this person analyzed data, is that measurable from our point of view, in that are we providing enough tools for this person to be able to analyze data? Are we providing efficiency so that they analyze the data efficiently? Are we doing all of that? So those will be measurable from our point of view. Kian asks me, what about outcomes? Also, what do you do about personal or social jobs? How do you translate it? Thank you for that great question. I try to keep the personal jobs away from the main job. So for example, in case of, and let's take a very intimate example of the motor vehicle accident victim, for example. They're going through a lot of emotional stuff, a lot of day-to-day challenges if the accident was severe, right? And that is important for us to understand. Especially if you're building a content strategy, for example, it is extremely important for you to understand what they're going through in terms of emotional or personal jobs. So it really depends on what you're building. At the same time, if you're building a tool for them to be able to navigate easily through that process, then I would keep the emotional and social jobs on the side. And I would focus on, let's say they're trying to schedule appointments, regular physiotherapy appointments. So how do you make that easier, better for a person who is temporarily disabled or handicapped in some way? How do you make that easier? So that is the job they're trying to get done. So great question, thank you. I hope I answered that. Okay, and then what I usually like to do after I have all of my jobs outlined, I like to create what is called an impact map. I don't know how many of you have used an impact map. It's not talked about a lot in the UX practice as much as we talk about journey maps. But I feel I have found this tool to be of great use, especially when you are dealing with clients who have no idea what UX is about, where education plays an important role for you to be able to drive the importance of design and strategy. So what an impact map is that you start with a goal. So it could be overarching goal, it could be a business goal, a personal goal, depending on who you're building it for. So you start there. And then look at the different personas that you're trying to help with your tool or your service or your solution. Once you have those personas defined, look at what are the different types of jobs they're trying to get done to achieve that goal. So it needs to all map back to the goal. And like I mentioned before, each job can be split into further micro jobs as you move forward in your research and as you start to think about it. So each job could then, you could ask yourself, is my tool going to help that job, help that person do that job better or in an efficient way? Or can I think of a brand new solution to address that job if nobody else is addressing it? This also helps you compare with your competition. Is your competition helping that person do job 1 better or job 2 better? Are you better at job 3 instead of job 1? Should you focus on making whatever you have in job one more efficient versus thinking of, building something for job number 3, for example. That could be like an innovative solution. So here's a question again from Q. I'm still wondering about whether use outcomes that are part of the JTBD outcomes or metrics like minimizing time. Would that be part of how to measure impact? Great question again. So basically here you're building a strategy, right? You're building a strategy, you're comparing, and this is, like I said, this is not end all be all. There is a lot more business analysis that needs to go, like what is your competition better at? Where do you want to play? What geographical regions you want to play in, so on and so forth, will also inform your strategy. But once you've decided that you want to make job one more efficient, then that would be your measure of success. Like, have you made it efficient? How efficient have you made it? So are you saving time? Are you saving money? What are you saving for that person? And of course, feedback, right? So this is not to replace any of the other stuff that we do, design and test and learn. All of that is valuable, extremely valuable. But if you're starting at persona level, you need to have that detail built in. I think it helps a lot. Another question coming in. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all these questions. I have read that if you can visualize the customer acting the job out, it is an activity or task, not a JTBD. Would you agree or disagree with this? Great question again. Thank you. So it's got nothing to do with acting out a job. I feel as long as the person is trying to solve some problem, trying to address an issue, or trying to do a thing like an actual physical act of doing it, that is JTBD. I don't like to get into the theory of how do there's so many different ways of jobs to be done, and there's arguments out there about what exactly is a job. Is it a task, or is it a thing on the app that you click is a job? And there could be n number of different ways of looking at it. But this is what I found has worked for me in most of my projects, where you focus on the core of the job that needs to be done. So it has got nothing to do with the physical action of doing job. You could be thinking. So analysis, for example, is mostly cognitive. It's a cognitive job, but how are you helping that person with that cognition, right? Are you making them better at solving, seeing a problem, for example, in their analysis? Are you highlighting what is wrong with that analysis, or what is wrong in their data, for example, so on and so forth. Does that answer your question, anonymous attendee? There's another question. Do you decide whether to make it better or new solution depend on ideas, budget, resource, or other metrics? It's a combination, Linda, thank you. It's a combination of everything. It has to do with ideas. You can go on n number of ideas, but if there's no budget and there's no resources, you can't make it happen. So those are all the constraints that you can think about. But if you do want to innovate, and if there is an innovation budget and there's an appetite for innovation, jobs is a great framework. It provides a solid foundation for you to be able to do that, to even think about innovation. And that, of course, has to be informed by the business goals in the end. So Gayatri, thank you. Because of this, its subjective nature, she asks, how important are personality traits in a persona? Great question. Thank you, Gayatri. Personality traits are important to some extent. Depends on who are you dealing with? So for example, if you tell me that the marketing persona is interested in hiking, or is a nature lover, that doesn't really give me much to do with. What am I going to do with that information? And that there are n number of personality traits around us who are doing the same job, right? There are n number of marketing people out there who have different interests, different lifestyles, totally different from each other. So it really depends on the context you're dealing with. If you're building a dashboard for a marketing persona, then you should just focus on the marketing persona and forget about all the personality traits. But if you're selling a pink dress to online to a person, then you might be interested in some of the personality traits, the age, the demographics around it, the interests, so on and so forth. So it really depends on the context you're building it for. Again, even there, when you're dealing with personality traits, if you're selling a pink dress to someone, I would be interested in understanding why are they going to buy your dress, right? What is the job they're trying to get done? Are they trying to find a matching thing for, I don't know, bridal wear, or like what are they trying to get done? And those are the things that I would focus on. Does that answer your question, Gayatri? Thank you. Thank you, George. Another great question from George. How do you see it mapping to an agile structure? Epics, features, backlogs, items, stories. Perfect. I love this question. It may help engage engineering better if they don't need to adopt a new concept. Perfect. I love this. So this is where the impact map comes in. And this is what we did for a very rapidly built solution, actually, in an agile framework. So what we did was we broke down the jobs. What do you call it? Prioritize them. So what is the most important job that this person wants to get done? And is that most important job easy for us to address at this point? So the technology has to be ready to address that job. So for example, for the retailer portal, there were two main things that they wanted to do. They wanted to see, one of the jobs that the retail persona does is analyze sales results. How much have I sold? How much do I need to sell? Am I meeting my targets? That was the main job. And that was a very critical job, but the technology was not ready for us to show that data yet. But the second job that the portal needed to address was communication. Like there was broken communication between the corporate head office and the retail shop, for example. So that's the job we decided to address first, without losing sight of the fact that the job number one needs to be addressed at some point soon. And then we broke it down into smaller chunks. And then actually, if you take this tree further down, we broke it down into stories, actually user stories that could be worked on, and we prioritized them that way. Does that answer your question, George? And I will be diving deep into that during the short course as well, as to how to do that. Great question from Mike. How are personas here related to job performance? We have a lot of confusion about that. My company persona includes many job performers. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I don't quite understand the question without an example, Mike. So if you can provide an example, that would be good. Melanie, do you have a persona example you can share that is done in the jobs to be done format? Yes, for sure. I'll be going through it in detail with the short course, and I'll be happy to share. Just get in touch with me on LinkedIn and I'll share some examples with you. Question from Mark. What would you say is the difference between scenarios and jobs? No, I did not cover this, Mark. Scenarios is how, to me, is the circumstance under which a job gets done, would be a scenario. So you're building it in terms of a story, right? That to me is slightly different from an actual job that needs to be done. But it is definitely useful information to build scenarios if you think it's necessary. Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for those great questions. So the next one, what do I have? Yeah, so what did we look at today? Um, we looked at what is a problem, what is the current problem with personas. I always like to start with the problem space, like why am I discussing personas today? So we looked at that, what are the goals of persona, and to reiterate my point, the larger goal of the persona, I think we should all remember, is to create responsible, human-centric business strategy. So without losing sight of business, we can't simply create personality-based personas if it doesn't solve a business problem, or doesn't help to solve a business problem, I should say. We looked at what is jobs to be done in brief. Again, I didn't go too much into the theory of it, but I will be going into the history of it a little bit during the short course as well. And I shared some examples, some tips, some great questions coming from you guys. Let me see if I can handle a couple more questions. So George is asking, we can tag a feature and user story with personas for traceability, thus making sure persona stays relevant, discoverable, and invite iteration. Perfect. I love that idea. In fact, I might use it. Thank you, George. Yeah, there are overlapping jobs that are not unique to persona. I totally agree. And once you have mapped out what are all the personas you want to address, it could also be especially if there are overlapping jobs, it could be an opportunity for pivot for your product or evolution of your product. If you're not tackling that persona yet, maybe in future your product will address, could be sold to that other persona as well. So yeah, that I didn't think of that, but thank you for sharing that, George. Another question from Kari. If you can use the impact map for creating use cases for developers, how can you use it to identify business strategy overlaps? Great question, Kari. So basically, the idea behind creating the jobs is to create a strategy and evoke evoke discussions with the business partners, with your business stakeholders, as to what, let's say you have a tool and you discover from your jobs research that you're not addressing the most important job that this person does. So let's say, for example, in case of the retail persona, the most important job the retailer does on a day-to-day basis is analyze sales. If he's not profitable, he cannot be in business. So it's critical to his business. Now, if your tool is helping this person do other things that are related to that job, great. But then could you in the future maybe have a business strategy around building something for this person to do that core job that you probably are not addressing today? So those are the kind of discussions that could be evoked from a detailed job description of the persona. Like what are the different things they do on a day-to-day basis, and then break them into smaller chunks and see if you want to play there. So that the business, it's for the business stakeholders to make that decision, whether that seems like a good opportunity. Maybe in some of those jobs, nobody's there, it's greenfield, nobody's looking at that yet. And you could maybe the first people to do something there to help that job to help the person do that job better, for example. Did I answer your question, Kari? Okay, perfect. So having said that, I think we've concluded our talk. We still have 10 more minutes, so feel free to punch in any more questions. I do have a workshop coming up, like I said, a short course hosted by UXPA again. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love to make friends on LinkedIn. Reach out and ask me questions if you have any. The way I pronounce my name is Swapnali, in case you didn't know. And I'm on LinkedIn. There's a link to the short course here when the slides get shared with you. And Carm can share that with you as well. It's on UXP website. And in the short course, I will be covering how to interview for jobs, what kind of questions to ask, where do you stop asking questions, so on and so forth. I'll help you with some research tips and tricks, because a lot of times we don't get budget to do in-depth research. We are limited. We have limited time to get that research done. So I'll share some tips on how to get to those jobs. And then how do you write the jobs correctly? How do you define them for you to be able to expand on them in the future, so that they're not too generic, but they're not too specific. So how do you balance that? And then you'll learn about how to identify opportunities for improvement and innovation. We saw some of that today, and we will dive deep into that during the course as well. So sign up if you're interested. And thank you very much for your questions and for attending. Let me see if I can handle a few more questions. Naming personas. Thank you, George. Thank you for the great question again. I have to be honest, I don't focus too much on the name. I'm open to calling it anything really, because the focus is really the job. And I try to be as accurate as possible to the research in terms of naming. I also try to include the job. So like marketing Mary, for example, or marketing Markle. I try to keep them as agnostic of ethnicity as possible. And that's all. Like I don't give it too much thought in terms of naming. Does that help you, George? Oh, sure. Someone wants me to show the how the jobs align to business goal. Is that the one you were looking for? Perfect. All right. Any more questions, comments? How did you like this? Did you find this helpful? Please type it in the comments. I like to see some feedback on this talk. And in the end, I hope you feel this way after the talk. I hope you feel like you've learned something. I hope you can take some tips back home and rethink about how we do our personas.
Okay.
Right.
So
one last question I can take maybe. Oh, thank you for that tip. They would have preferred if the pace was a bit slower. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll keep that in mind for next time. How do you do quantitative sizing of persona? And quantitative down also helps the size of job. Yes, for sure. And I will cover that in the short course as well, as to how to quantify some of the metrics you've collected from your research, and how do you validate that with the persona. Okay, thank you. I think that is all for the questions. Thank you, Carm. You can go ahead.
okay. So if we are done, do we feel like we have all of our questions answered? Are we good, Swapnali, to wrap up?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys for joining. This has been a great and informative session. Again, Swapnali will join us in August for the short course, so be sure to check uxpa.org for upcoming webinars and short courses. Again, this recording will be made available for you guys within the next 72 hours. So again, thank you for attending. Thank you, Swapnali, for leading today's webinar. And you guys have an awesome weekend. All right.
Thank you, Carm, for organizing all of this. It was great pleasure, and hope to stay in touch with all of you attendees. Feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.